The weathered rancher spits into the dust, declaring to his neighbor, "I'm too old for marriage," just as the mysterious woman in black steps off the evening stagecoach and walks directly toward him, her eyes fixed with unmistakable purpose. The townsfolk of Coyote's End whisper Black Widow behind gloved hands, watching the broken-down cattleman they've already written off as yesterday's failure. They assume his fate is sealed, to die alone on worthless land, crushed by debts to the town's ruthless enforcer. But this enigmatic widow, who buried 3 husbands and carries secrets darker than her mourning dress, sees something in the stubborn rancher that others cannot. She knows his worthless ranch holds the key to a fortune that could transform or destroy their entire world. When she finally speaks, will her words save them both, or condemn the entire town to ruin? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. Eli Carter leaned against the weathered porch rail of his ranch house, watching dust devils dance across his dying pasture. The cattle clustered around the last reliable water trough, their ribs showing through patchy hides. Another calf had died in the night. He'd buried it at dawn beside 4 others. "You should think about finding yourself a wife," Clara Thompson called from her wagon. The kind boarding house owner had stopped by with supplies from town. "Someone to help carry the load." Eli spat into the dirt. "I'm too old for marriage games, Clara. Look around. What woman would want this mess?" Clara's weathered face softened with pity. She'd known him since before Mary died. Back when the Carter Ranch ran black cattle across 1,000 acres. Now the herd barely numbered 50 head, and the bank notices kept piling up on his kitchen table. "Don't talk like that. You're only 58. Might as well be 100. Eli gestured toward the sagging fence posts and cracked barn walls. "I can barely keep myself alive, let alone take care of someone else." The sound of approaching hooves interrupted their conversation. A lone rider emerged from the heat shimmer, dressed in black from hat to boots. Even from a distance, Eli could see the rider sat straight in the saddle with practiced confidence. Clara squinted against the sun. Now who could that be? The rider drew closer, revealing a woman with sharp features and calculating eyes. Her black dress was travel-worn but well-made. And she wore no wedding ring despite her mourning attire. She reined in her horse near the porch without invitation. "You must be Eli Carter," she said, her voice carrying a slight Eastern accent. "Depends who's asking." The woman dismounted with fluid grace. "My name is Selena Barnes. I've come a long way to find you." Clara's intake of breath was sharp enough to cut glass. Every person in Arizona Territory had heard whispers of Selena Barnes, the Black Widow who'd buried 3 husbands in 5 years. Bad luck followed her like vultures, they said. Men died around her. "Ma'am." Eli touched his hat brim out of politeness, but his posture remained guarded. "If you're looking for charity or a handout, I'm afraid you've wasted a trip." Selena's laugh held no humor. "Mr. Carter, I'm here to offer you something. Not ask for it. I don't take charity either. This isn't charity. It's business." She reached into her saddlebag and withdrew a leather portfolio. "I represent certain interests back east. Railroad interests." Eli's stomach clenched. The railroad meant progress, but it also meant powerful men who took what they wanted and left bones in their wake. "My land's not for sale." "Everything's for sale at the right price." Selena opened the portfolio, revealing official-looking documents. "Your ranch sits on what my employers consider prime real estate for the transcontinental expansion." Clara backed toward her wagon. Smart woman knew when to make herself scarce around dangerous conversations. "I should head back to town. Eli, you think about what I said." After Clara's wagon disappeared down the dusty road, Selena stepped closer to the porch. "Your neighbor's right about one thing. This place is dying without help." Eli's jaw tightened. "It's survived worse." "Has it? Because from where I stand, you're maybe 6 months from losing everything anyway." Selena's eyes swept across the struggling ranch with professional assessment. "Gideon Hawk holds your paper, doesn't he?" The mention of Hawk's name sent ice through Eli's veins. The town's enforcer had been circling like a buzzard for months, buying up failed ranches and forcing out anyone who couldn't pay their debts. Hawk's methods weren't technically illegal, but they left families broken and desperate. How do you know about Hawk? I make it my business to know who controls what in any territory I visit. Selina climbed the porch steps uninvited. Hawk's been systematically acquiring land around these parts. Smart man, though he doesn't know what he's really sitting on. And what's that? Selina pulled out a geological survey map, spreading it across the porch rail. Red marks dotted the area around Eli's property. Underground springs. Your worthless ranch sits right on top of the largest freshwater source for 100 miles in any direction. Eli studied the map, his heart hammering. You're telling me there's water under my land? Enough to supply a railroad depot, maintenance yards, and a growing town. My employers are prepared to pay handsomely for access to those springs. How much? Enough to pay off Hawk and set you up comfortable for the rest of your life. Enough to start over anywhere you choose. Eli stared at the survey marks, his mind racing. For 2 years he'd watched his life crumble piece by piece. The drought had killed his pasture. Disease had taken half his cattle. Mary's medical bills had drained their savings before consumption finally claimed her. Every morning brought fresh evidence of his failures. But something about Selina Barnes felt dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with the stories people told. Her eyes held secrets, and men who dealt with railroad money often found themselves buried beneath their own ambition. Why should I trust a woman they call the Black Widow? Selina's smile was sharp as broken glass. Because, Mr. Carter, I'm the only thing standing between you and Gideon Hawk, and once Hawk figures out what's really under your land, he won't be content to wait for foreclosure. Thunder rumbled in the distance, though no clouds marked the horizon. The sound of approaching riders carried on the hot wind. The approaching riders resolved into Gideon Hawk and 2 of his men. Hawk sat his black stallion like a king surveying his domain, his cold eyes taking in every detail of Eli's struggling ranch. The man had grown fat on other people's misery, his expensive suit and gold watch chain announcing his success to anyone who cared to look. Selina folded her geological survey with practiced speed, tucking it back into her portfolio. The movement was so smooth that Eli almost missed it, but Hawk's sharp gaze caught everything. "Carter," Hawk called out, not bothering to dismount. "Heard you had a visitor." Word travels fast in a small town. Hawk's attention shifted to Selina, and his expression changed from casual intimidation to predatory interest. "Ma'am, I don't believe we've been introduced. Gideon Hawk at your service." Selina stepped forward with a slight curtsy, her demeanor shifting to match what men expected from women in mourning. "Selina Barnes, Mr. Hawk. I was just offering my condolences to Mr. Carter for his recent losses." Eli bit back his surprise at her quick lie. The woman was clearly more dangerous than her soft voice suggested. "Mrs. Barnes," Hawk's voice carried a warning underneath the politeness. "You might want to reconsider your choice of company. Carter here has been making some poor financial decisions lately." "A widow learns to recognize hardship, Mr. Hawk. Sometimes a kind word helps more than judgment." Hawk dismounted and approached the porch with the confidence of a man who owned everything he could see. "Speaking of financial matters, Carter, that payment's coming due next week. Hope you've got something figured out. I'll have your money. Will you now?" Hawk's laugh held no warmth. "Because, from where I sit, you're selling off cattle just to buy feed for the ones you got left. That's not the behavior of a man with ready cash." Selina moved closer to Eli, her presence somehow steadying despite the circumstances. "Perhaps Mr. Carter has prospects you're unaware of." Hawk's eyes narrowed as he studied her. "Prospects? What kind of prospects might those be?" "The kind that are none of your business," Eli said. "Oh, but Carter, everything in this territory is my business, especially when it involves property that might soon belong to me." Hawk stepped onto the porch without invitation, his bulk casting a shadow across the weathered boards. "You see, Mrs. Barnes, your friend here owes me considerable money. Money he borrowed against this ranch when times got desperate." Selina's face remained composed, but Eli caught the slight tightening around her eyes. She was calculating. measuring threats and opportunities with the speed of someone who'd survived worse situations. Debts can be negotiated, Mr. Hawk. Surely a man of your business acumen understands the value of flexibility. Hawk chuckled, but his attention remained fixed on Selina with uncomfortable intensity. A woman who understands business. How refreshing. He moved closer to her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Perhaps you and I should discuss these negotiations privately, over dinner tonight. Eli felt his hands curl into fists, but Selina's slight shake of the head warned him off. She was handling this her way. Mr. Hawk, I appreciate the invitation, but I'm still in mourning for my late husband. It wouldn't be proper. Of course. Forgive my enthusiasm. Hawk stepped back, but his gaze never left her face. Though a woman shouldn't isolate herself too long. Life must go on. Indeed it must. Hawk turned back to Eli, his friendly mask slipping. 1 week, Carter. Have my money or start packing. He mounted his horse with practiced ease. Mrs. Barnes, I do hope you'll reconsider my dinner invitation. A woman of your refinement deserves better company than a failing rancher. The three riders disappeared in a cloud of dust, leaving an uncomfortable silence behind them. Eli found himself studying Selina with new respect and growing wariness. You handled that well, he said. I've had practice dealing with men like Hawk. Selina smoothed her skirts and sat down on the porch steps uninvited. He's more dangerous than I initially thought. What do you mean? The way he looked at your property. He knows something or suspects it. Men don't usually take such personal interest in routine foreclosures. Eli joined her on the steps, maintaining careful distance. You think he knows about the water? I think Gideon Hawk makes it his business to know everything that might turn a profit in this territory. The question is how much he knows and how far he's willing to go to get it. They sat in contemplative silence, watching the sun sink lower toward the horizon. Eli found himself stealing glances at this mysterious woman who'd appeared in his life like a desert storm. 3 dead husbands meant either terrible luck or terrible secrets, but her quick thinking had just saved him from immediate confrontation with Hawk. Why are you really here? He asked. Selina turned to meet his gaze, and for a moment her careful composure slipped. He glimpsed something vulnerable beneath the surface, something that understood loss and loneliness. Because sometimes the right opportunity can save more than one person, Mr. Carter, and sometimes a woman gets tired of running from her reputation. The evening wind picked up, carrying the scent of dust and distant rain that might never come. 3 days later, Eli found Selina at Clara's boarding house, helping sort through a pile of legal documents. The widow Thompson had been trying to sell her late husband's tools, but the buyer was offering half their worth. Selina sat across from the man with papers spread between them like a battlefield. These tools are German steel, Selina said, her voice carrying quiet authority. The asking price reflects their actual value, not what you hope to steal them for. The buyer, a nervous man with tobacco-stained teeth, shifted in his chair. Lady, I got to make a profit too. Selina pulled out a small notebook and flipped through several pages. I checked with 3 other tool merchants in Phoenix. All confirmed these prices are fair market value. She slid a handwritten list across the table. You can pay Mrs. Thompson what her property is worth, or she can wait for a buyer who will. The man studied the list, his confidence evaporating. Within minutes, he was counting out proper payment, while muttering about Eastern women and their interfering ways. After he left, Clara turned to Selina with tears in her eyes. How did you know to check those prices? My first husband died 2 years after we married, left me with nothing but debts and a barn full of equipment I didn't understand. Selina carefully folded the legal papers and handed them to Clara. I learned fast that grieving widows make easy targets for men who mistake kindness for stupidity. Eli watched from the boarding house doorway, impressed despite his suspicions. Selina Barnes might carry a dangerous reputation, but her actions spoke of someone who protected the vulnerable rather than preyed on them. That afternoon he found her examining his account books without permission. She sat at his kitchen table with ledgers spread around her like she owned the place. Her finger traced columns of numbers while she made notes in her small notebook. "Making yourself at home," he observed. "Your bookkeeping is better than I expected." She didn't look up from the ledger. "Your late wife taught you proper accounting methods." Eli's jaw tightened at the mention of Mary. "How did you know that?" "The handwriting changes 3 years ago. Becomes more systematic, more careful." Selina finally met his eyes. "She was educated back east, wasn't she?" "Boston. Her father sent her to one of those schools for ladies." The memory still hurt. Mary had given up a comfortable life to follow him to Arizona territory. She said keeping proper records was the difference between success and failure in any business. Smart woman. "These books will help us prove Hawk's been manipulating your payment schedules." Selina opened another ledger, this one filled with Mary's careful script documenting every business transaction. Dates, amounts, witnesses, terms of agreement. Mary had recorded everything with the precision of someone who understood how easily poor record-keeping could destroy a family. "Look at this." Selina pointed to entries from 8 months earlier. "Your original payment schedule with Hawk was 30 days, but he's been demanding payments every 21 days since your wife died." Eli leaned over her shoulder to study the entries. Mary's handwriting was so familiar it made his chest ache. "I thought I was imagining it." "You weren't. He's been systematically shortening your payment windows while keeping the same monthly amounts. That's fraud under territorial law." "How do you know territorial law?" Selina's expression grew distant. "My second husband was a lawyer in Colorado before the mine accident took him. Taught me more than I wanted to know about contracts and legal manipulation." She pulled out additional papers from her portfolio. More documentation, more evidence of patterns Eli had been too overwhelmed to recognize. Hawk had been using the same tactics on other struggling ranchers throughout the territory. "This goes beyond simple debt collection," Selina said. "He's been orchestrating foreclosures on specific properties, properties that share certain geographical features." Eli studied the map she spread across the table. Red marks indicated recent foreclosures, and they formed a clear pattern around natural water sources and transportation routes. "He's been planning this for months, maybe years. The question is whether he's working alone or if someone's backing him." Selina traced the pattern with her finger. "This level of coordination requires capital and information most local operators don't possess." A knock at the door interrupted their planning. Clara stood on the porch with a worried expression and a folded paper in her hand. "This came for you, Selina. Telegram from the railroad office." Selina read the message quickly, her face growing pale. She handed it to Eli without comment. The telegram was brief but clear. Railroad executives were arriving in Coyote's End within the week to finalize land acquisitions. They expected all necessary properties to be under contract by then. "They don't know about the complications with Hawk," Selina said. "What happens if they arrive and find out you haven't secured the water rights?" "They'll find another way to get what they need. Railroad companies don't accept failure gracefully." Eli understood the implication. If Selina's employers decided to handle things directly, they'd bring resources that would make Hawk's intimidation look gentle by comparison. Small ranchers would be crushed between competing interests with no regard for their lives or livelihoods. "How much time do we have?" 5 days to expose Hawk's operation and secure legal protection for the other ranchers, or 6 days to watch this entire territory get turned into a corporate battlefield." Thunder rumbled overhead, and the first drops of rain began pattering against the dusty ground. After months of drought, the timing felt like either divine intervention or cruel irony. The rain continued through the night, turning the dusty streets of Coyote's End into muddy rivers. Eli found Selina at Clara's boarding house before dawn, already dressed and preparing for what looked like a dangerous day. Her black dress had been replaced with practical riding clothes, and she moved with the focused intensity of someone preparing for battle. "We need to move fast," she said, checking her saddlebags. "Hawk will be watching for any sign we're working together." Clara appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face creased with worry. "You two are playing with fire. Gideon Hawk doesn't forgive people who cross him. Then we better make sure we don't give him the chance to get even, Eli replied. They rode out separately, meeting at the abandoned Hendricks place 2 miles south of town. The ranch had been one of Hawk's earlier acquisitions, and the empty buildings stood as a warning to anyone who might resist his methods. Weeds grew through the porch boards, and the barn door swung loose on broken hinges. Selina dismounted and pulled a leather satchel from her saddle. Tom Hendricks kept copies of all his business correspondence. His widow gave them to Clara before she moved back east. Inside the satchel were dozens of letters, contracts, and payment records. Hendricks had been even more meticulous than Mary, documenting every interaction with Hawk's organization. The pattern of manipulation was clear and consistent. Look at this, Selina pointed to a series of letters dated 6 months apart. Hawk offered to buy the Hendricks place 3 times before calling in the debt. Each offer was for less than the previous one. Eli studied the correspondence. He was deliberately weakening Hendricks' position. More than that, he was timing the offers to coincide with seasonal cash shortages, spring when cattle prices are lowest, fall when feed costs are highest. Selina organized the papers with practiced efficiency. This isn't opportunistic lending, this is systematic wealth transfer. They spent the morning visiting other families who'd lost property to Hawk's organization. Each story followed the same pattern: friendly initial contact, generous loan terms, gradual tightening of payment schedules, then sudden foreclosure when families couldn't adapt quickly enough. Mrs. Patterson, whose husband had lost their farm the previous year, served them coffee with shaking hands. Gideon was so helpful at first. Said he understood how hard things were for working folks. When did the terms start changing? Selina asked. Maybe 6 months after we signed. Payment dates got moved up a few days at a time. Harold thought he was misremembering, but I kept a diary. Mrs. Patterson retrieved a worn notebook from her kitchen drawer. Wrote down every conversation, every payment, every change. The diary entries confirmed their suspicions. Hawk had been using psychological manipulation alongside financial pressure, making victims doubt their own memories while gradually increasing the burden until failure became inevitable. By afternoon, they had testimonies from 7 families and documentation spanning 3 years. The evidence painted a picture of systematic fraud that no honest court could ignore. But presenting evidence required staying alive long enough to reach a judge, and Hawk's influence extended throughout the territorial government. They returned to Eli's ranch as the sun began setting, both exhausted from a day of careful investigation. Selina sat at his kitchen table organizing their findings, while Eli prepared a simple dinner. The domestic routine felt surprisingly comfortable despite the circumstances. "There's something else," Selina said, pulling out a telegram from her coat pocket. "This arrived while we were gone." Eli read the message over her shoulder. It was from the railroad company, but not addressed to Selina. Instead, it was directed to G. Hawk, confirming receipt of his territorial assessment and approving additional funding for property consolidation activities. "Hawk's working for a railroad company," Eli said. "Not my railroad company, a competing one." Selina's face had gone pale. "This explains everything. He's been systematically acquiring properties for the Colorado and Western line, while you've been trying to secure the same route for your employers. My company doesn't know they're bidding against someone who's already been manipulating the local market for years." Selina stood and began pacing the small kitchen. "Hawk has inside information about our survey reports and construction timelines." Eli felt pieces of a larger conspiracy falling into place. "Someone in your company is feeding him information. Has to be. These surveys were supposed to be confidential until we completed land acquisition." Selina stopped pacing and turned to face him. "Which means Hawk knows exactly how valuable your ranch really is." The implication hung between them like a loaded gun. If Hawk understood the strategic importance of Eli's property, he wouldn't be content to wait for legal foreclosure. Men had died for far less valuable prizes, and the Black Widow's reputation suggested she understood that reality better than most. "What do we do?" Eli asked. "We expose the whole conspiracy before he realizes we know about it. Tomorrow's the town meeting about the Henderson Road improvements. Everyone will be there, including the territorial judge. And if Hawk tries to stop us? Selena's smile was sharp as winter wind. Then we find out if my reputation for survival is stronger than his reputation for intimidation. Outside, storm clouds gathered again, promising another night of rain. In the distance, the sound of multiple riders approached through the gathering darkness. The riders turned out to be Clara Thompson and 3 other women from town. They arrived at Eli's ranch carrying baskets covered with checkered cloth, their faces set with determined purpose. Clara dismounted first, her usual gentle demeanor replaced by something harder. "We need to talk," she said, glancing between Eli and Selena. "All of us." The women filed into Eli's kitchen without invitation. Mrs. Patterson was among them, along with Sarah Martinez, whose husband had lost his blacksmith shop to Hawk's organization, and elderly Mrs. Chen, who ran the general store with her son. "We've been talking since you visited today," Mrs. Patterson said, "comparing stories, sharing what we know." Clara set her basket on the table and pulled back the cloth, revealing not food, but papers, legal documents, correspondence, and business records that the women had been quietly collecting for months. "You're not the only ones investigating Gideon Hawk," Clara continued. "We just had to be more careful about it." Selena leaned forward, her attention sharp. "What did you find?" Mrs. Martinez spoke up, her voice carrying barely controlled anger. "Hawk's been receiving telegrams from Colorado Springs every week for the past year. My son works at the telegraph office. He's been keeping copies. The telegram copies told a damning story. The Colorado and Western Railroad had been planning their route through Arizona Territory since early 1886, using Hawk as their local agent to acquire necessary properties through foreclosure and intimidation. "Look at this one," Mrs. Chen pointed to a telegram dated 2 months earlier. "They're not just buying land. They're planning to build a maintenance depot and switching yard right here in Coyote's End." Eli studied the messages, his understanding of the conspiracy deepening. "That's why Hawk needed so many properties, not just for the rail line, but for the entire railroad infrastructure." "There's more," Clara said grimly. She pulled out another set of papers. "Hawk's been corresponding with someone inside the competing railroad company. Someone who's been feeding him information about their survey routes and land acquisition plans." Selena went very still. "May I see those?" The letters revealed the depth of the betrayal. Someone with access to confidential railroad surveys had been selling information to Hawk, allowing him to stay one step ahead of legitimate land acquisition efforts. The handwriting was familiar enough that Selena's face went pale as she read. "I know who's been feeding him information," she said quietly. "My supervisor, James Mitchell. He's been sending updates on our progress to someone using a false name, but the details match everything Hawk would need to know." Mrs. Patterson opened her diary again, pointing to specific entries. Hawk always seemed to know exactly when families were most vulnerable, when the bank payments were due, when seasonal income would be lowest, when medical bills or other emergencies would strain resources. "Because Mitchell was providing him with economic intelligence along with survey data," Selena said. "My company has been researching local financial conditions as part of our route planning. We knew which ranchers were struggling and when they'd be most likely to sell." The women had uncovered a conspiracy that went far beyond simple land fraud. 2 railroad companies were effectively at war for the same route, with one using systematic economic warfare against the local population, while the other remained unaware of the manipulation. "Tomorrow's town meeting is our chance to expose everything," Clara said. "Judge Morrison will be there for the road improvement discussions. If we present all this evidence together, he'll have to act." "Will he, though?" Mrs. Martinez asked. "Hawk's got connections throughout the territorial government." "Judge Morrison's different," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "His daughter married into my family. He's an honest man, but he needs ironclad evidence to move against someone with Hawk's political protection." Selena organized the papers into neat stacks, her legal training evident in how she structured the evidence. "We have documentation of systematic fraud, conspiracy between railroad interests, and abuse of territorial banking regulations. That should be enough for criminal charges." "If we live long enough to present it," Eli said. The women exchanged glances that suggested they'd already considered that possibility. Clara reached into her basket again and withdrew a small derringer, placing it on the table with steady hands. We've been preparing for that possibility too, she said. Hawk thinks women are helpless victims. He's about to learn otherwise. Mrs. Patterson nodded grimly. My herald didn't fight back because he thought he was protecting me. But sometimes protection means standing up to bullies, not hiding from them. Outside, thunder rolled across the darkening sky. The storm that had been building all day was finally ready to break, and the timing felt symbolic. Tomorrow would bring either justice or catastrophe, with very little middle ground possible. Selina gathered the evidence into her portfolio, her movements precise despite the magnitude of what they were planning. There's something else you need to know. My railroad company's executives arrive tomorrow afternoon. If this meeting goes badly, if Hawk realizes what we're planning, he'll accelerate his timeline. What does that mean? Clara asked. It means anyone who threatens his operation will be eliminated before the railroad executives arrive, permanently. The women absorbed this information with the stoic acceptance of people who'd already faced loss and survived. They'd spent months watching their community be systematically destroyed by a man who viewed them as obstacles rather than human beings. Now they had one chance to fight back using the law instead of violence. One chance to prove that evidence and courage could triumph over corruption and intimidation. The town meeting convened at noon in the dusty community hall, with Judge Morrison presiding from behind a makeshift podium. Nearly every resident of Coyote's End had gathered, their faces showing the strain of months under Hawk's systematic oppression. Gideon Hawk sat in the front row with his usual confident smirk, clearly expecting another routine display of his authority. Eli entered through the back door with Selina at his side, both carrying portfolios of evidence. The whispers started immediately. The Black Widow and the broken-down rancher made an unlikely pair, and their alliance had been the subject of intense speculation for days. Judge Morrison called for order and began discussing road improvement proposals. The routine business felt surreal given what was about to unfold. Hawk occasionally nodded or made brief comments, playing the role of concerned citizen, while his eyes tracked every movement in the crowded room. Clara Thompson stood when the judge opened the floor for public comments. Her voice was steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to unleash. Your Honor, we have evidence of criminal conspiracy that affects every family in this territory. Hawk's confident expression flickered. He hadn't expected the attack to come from the mild-mannered boarding house owner. Selina moved to the front of the room, her black dress and composed bearing commanding attention. She placed her portfolio on the judge's table and began methodically presenting evidence. Telegraph copies, fraudulent contracts, and testimony from multiple victims painted a comprehensive picture of systematic fraud. Mr. Hawk has been operating as an agent for the Colorado and Western Railroad, Selina announced. He's been using illegal foreclosure practices to acquire properties for corporate interests while deceiving this community about his true intentions. The room erupted in angry murmurs. Families who'd lost their homes and businesses finally understood they'd been victims of a calculated conspiracy rather than simple economic misfortune. Hawk rose from his chair, his face flushed with rage. Your Honor, this is nothing but lies spread by a woman with a reputation for destroying men's lives. Then explain these telegraph records, Eli said, stepping forward with his own evidence. Your correspondence with Colorado Railroad executives, your payments for providing confidential survey information, your systematic manipulation of loan terms to force families into foreclosure. Judge Morrison examined the documents with growing concern. The evidence was overwhelming and meticulously organized. Dates matched, signatures were authentic, and the pattern of fraud was undeniable. Mrs. Patterson stood next, her diary clutched in trembling hands. He changed our payment schedules without notice, made us doubt our own memories while he stole our farm. One by one, other victims rose to share their stories. The Martinez family, the Chens, the Hendricks widow who'd returned from Phoenix specifically for this meeting. Each testimony added weight to the mountain of evidence against Hawk's operation. Furthermore, Selina continued, Mr. Hawk has been receiving inside information from a corrupt official within my own railroad company. This conspiracy involves corporate espionage and violation of federal railroad regulations. Hawk's composure finally cracked completely. He lunged toward Selina with violent intent, but Eli stepped between them. The two men faced each other across the crowded room, years of accumulated hatred crackling in the air. "You've destroyed enough lives," Eli said quietly. "It ends here." Judge Morrison pounded his gavel repeatedly, restoring order to the chaos. "Mr. Hawk, you will sit down immediately or face additional charges of contempt and assault." Surrounded by the unified opposition of people he'd spent years terrorizing, Hawk found his authority crumbling. The fear he'd cultivated through intimidation evaporated when confronted with organized resistance and legal accountability. "Based on this evidence," Judge Morrison announced, "I'm issuing warrants for fraud, conspiracy, and violation of territorial banking regulations. Sheriff, please place Mr. Hawk under arrest." The sheriff, who'd been notably absent during Hawk's reign of intimidation, stepped forward with obvious relief. Arresting Hawk with judicial backing was far different from confronting him alone. As Hawk was led away in shackles, his final words were directed at Selina. "This won't end with me. There are bigger interests at stake than you understand." Selina watched him go with calm satisfaction. "I understand perfectly, and they'll face the same justice you just received." The railroad executives arrived that afternoon to find their local operation in ruins and their inside informant exposed. Faced with criminal charges and public scandal, both railroad companies were forced to negotiate fair compensation for all affected properties. Selina proved as skilled at legitimate business as she'd been at uncovering fraud. Within a week, she'd arranged deals that allowed families to keep their land while providing railroad access through easement agreements. The water rights beneath Eli's ranch became the foundation for a town water system that would serve Coyote's End for generations. 6 months later, Eli stood on his rebuilt porch watching cattle graze across green pastures. The underground springs had been properly developed, providing reliable water for his herd and enough excess to supply the new railroad depot. His debt to Hawk's operation had been nullified by the criminal conviction, and the railroad compensation had funded major improvements to his ranch. Selina emerged from the house carrying 2 cups of coffee, her black morning dress replaced by practical work clothes. She'd shed the Black Widow reputation along with the protective facade it represented. "Any regrets?" she asked, settling beside him on the porch swing they'd built together. Eli accepted the coffee and considered the question seriously. His life had changed completely, but the transformation had brought partnership instead of loneliness, prosperity instead of failure, and hope instead of bitter resignation. "Just one," he said finally. "I regret saying I was too old for marriage. Turns out the right person makes age irrelevant." Selina smiled, the expression transforming her face from mysterious to genuinely warm. "Sometimes the best things are worth waiting a lifetime for, even when you don't know you're waiting."